Sign the contract before we serve the pie or your marriage ends on Monday morning. The voice of my mother-in-law Rosalind was terrifyingly soft. She never shouted because she did not have to. For decades she had used that freezing composure to make people realize exactly how worthless they were to her family. I stared at the legal document resting on the linen tablecloth. It was a postnuptial agreement designed to strip me of everything. The thick paper looked incredibly expensive, and a fancy pen rested beside it like an extra fork. My husband Gideon sat directly across from me, avoiding my gaze completely. He kept staring into his crystal beverage glass like he wanted to disappear into the ice. His father Vance sliced the meat with slow mechanical movements, while his sister Tabitha casually checked her manicured nails. Her husband Barrett watched me like someone waiting for an explosion. This hostile environment was my typical holiday experience since marrying Gideon 3 years ago. I was young and foolish enough to think that affection could shield me from malice. Before I reveal what I placed on that table instead of my signature, let me know where you are watching from in the comments section. This is a true account of what happens when arrogant people completely miscalculate who they are dealing with. Rosalind folded her manicured hands and gave me a look of pure disappointment. She called me by my name like it was an annoying chore to speak it. She told me that I was intelligent enough to understand what their family legacy represented. She claimed that their demands were just a simple formality to protect what the grandfather of Gideon had built from nothing. It did not feel like a mere formality to me. Tabitha smirked with condescension and reminded me that I entered the marriage with absolutely nothing. They constantly brought up my background, which meant growing up in a tiny Midwestern apartment. My mother worked at a grocery store and my father left when I was a toddler. They assumed I targeted their wealthy son for financial gain because they never bothered to learn anything about my career. To them I was just an insignificant outsider. Gideon previously told them that I operated a small software firm, but Rosalind dismissed it completely. They assumed my little project was just a cute hobby. They were entirely wrong about who was actually controlling the board. I looked at Gideon and refused to sign the contract. The entire dining room became dead silent as my husband finally looked up with panic in his eyes. He knew a disaster was unfolding in real time. Vance threatened to start annulment proceedings tomorrow morning on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. Barrett cleared his throat and acted like the reasonable expert since he graduated from a prestigious law school. He proudly stated that their private investigation proved my business only earned $48,000 last year. He smiled with absolute certainty that they held all the cards and could crush me without any effort. I knew that Barrett was secretly using family funds for an undisclosed investment account that was currently under federal scrutiny. Instead of exposing him yet, I told them to use their smartphones to search for an enterprise called Veller Systems. Rosalind looked annoyed, but Gideon slowly retrieved his device and began typing the letters. I watched the color drain from his face as he processed the information on his screen. Veller Systems was the massive parent corporation that controlled numerous hidden entities. The public valuation of my company was over $2 billion. The entire net worth of the family standing against me was merely $400 million. They had no idea that one of my subsidiaries actually provided the massive commercial credit line keeping their real estate empire afloat. They only knew the name of the bank. Rosalind asked if I had been concealing this massive enterprise since before the wedding. I explained that I founded the corporation when I was 24 years old and the small filing they discovered belonged to an idle shell company. I picked up their unfair legal agreement. I told them they made a massive mistake by assuming I was a gold digger who had absolutely nothing of value to offer. Gideon asked how this was possible with a shaking voice. I reminded him that I never lied about my work. My mind flashed back to our engagement dinner 3 years ago, when Rosalind cornered me in the library. She coldly informed me that their family would always protect itself and that they were watching my every move. I remembered sitting in my car crying and thinking about my hardworking mother. During that difficult night long ago, I promised myself that these elitist individuals would never break my spirit. I reached into my leather bag and pulled out a thick folder, then placed it next to their document. I informed Vance that their family business missed a critical payment on their $12 million loan last month. Because I recently purchased that financial institution, I currently held the debt to their entire lifestyle. Vance gasped and tried to stand, but I told him to sit down immediately. I explained that I had no desire to destroy their business, but they needed to understand reality. Then I turned to Barrett and revealed that his secret trading account received illegal insider information. I calmly announced that I forwarded the evidence to federal investigators 6 days ago. Barrett stared at me in absolute shock as his mouth fell open. I made it clear that I did not plan this confrontation to happen during the holiday. They chose tonight to ambush me with their legal trap next to the food. Rosalind looked at me with a completely altered expression as she tried to calculate her next move. She finally asked what I wanted from them. I replied that I just wanted my husband to look at me honestly. I asked Gideon if he knew about the postnuptial agreement before tonight. He looked down and confessed that his parents told him it was just a standard formality. Suddenly the sound of heavy tires on gravel echoed from the driveway outside. I informed the table that the federal compliance team had arrived to interview Barrett regarding his financial crimes. Tabitha began screaming in panic as the front doorbell rang. I stood up and looked at Rosalind one last time. I told her that I did not act out of hatred but because they tried to erase my rights. I told Gideon that I would stay at a local hotel if he wanted to have a genuine conversation. I walked out into the chilly November night air and past the investigators. I started my vehicle and watched the glowing mansion fade away. My phone buzzed with a message from my executive assistant confirming that the media would publish the story on Monday. I thought about Gideon and remembered the genuine man I fell in love with before his family corrupted him. I drove through the massive iron gates without feeling any spiteful joy. I simply felt an incredible sense of peace because I never needed a seat at their table to begin with.